We're going to be learning the top 10 teachings of Brachos Daf Tesvav, page 15. The first of the top 10 teachings are a very powerful teaching that the Gemara says that Rabbi Yochanan says, somebody wants to accept a complete yoke of heaven upon themselves. The Gemara says, Yifne, one should turn aside. The Rashi explains that they should relieve themselves in the bathroom. V'yitol yadav v'yiniach teffilen. You should wash your hands, put on tefillin. V'yikra kriya shema, you should recite the shema. V'yispalel, and you should daven. V'zuhi malchus shemayim shlema. This is a complete acceptance of the divine realm. So the Mei Shilach explains that in life, what we're really looking for is we're looking for a new day. One of the reasons why I sit here by a window is because through this window I saw the dawn turn into day today, and I missed the day turn into night, but I see that it's night. I get to see the change in the world. And the problem with a lot of people in their approach to Torah, myself included, is that often we don't see change, we don't see growth, we don't see renewal, we don't see chidushim Torah. We're not coming up with new Torahs. It's just the same old. So the Mei Shilach suggests that perhaps we can say that this statement on Brachos Daf Tesvav is saying the following. We understand that the point of the Kriya Shema is to recite the words that remind us of God's oneness and unity, as well as the love of God and acceptance of His mitzvot, and also the conclusion of the Kriya Shema, which is emes, which is God is the God of truth. Also, we know that when one puts on tefillin, the different parts of the tefillin spell out the name of God. There's the letter Shin on the tefillin, the box. There's a Yud and the knot. There's a Dalid and the knot. So you have Shin, and then you have Dalid and Yud. That's one of God's names. Again, God, and God is ultimately about truth. So what that means is that God is the source of inspiration. God is the thing that ultimately renews the world every day. And when we connect to that God, then we have His chachos, then we renew, and then we are inspired, and then we also look at the Torah with fresh eyes, and we see things. One of the most beautiful things is when I saw my children growing up. We'd walk down the streets here in Manhattan, and my daughter would point to things on top of the roof, because there's so many interesting things on top of each roof in Manhattan. Now they're building the buildings larger and larger. In fact, the taxi driver, I went to a wedding last night, and the taxi driver on 52nd or something says, "You see this corner of this building going up?" He says, "This building is going to be the tallest building in New York. Except the only reason why the Freedom Tower is higher is because of the spire on top," right? So there's new buildings going up, but some buildings are not so high. So my daughter would see every little thing on the top of each roof, and this is when she was like 4 or 5, and she'd just say, "What's that? And look at that, and look at that." And it just reminded me that I walk by the same block every day, and I don't notice anything on any of the roofs. They're there, there's buildings. So sometimes when you're little, when you're young, it's still new, so you're still paying attention, and it's exciting because you haven't seen it before. It's different, and you pay attention. So that the beauty of the Torah is that God is asking us to look with new eyes at it. And the way we look with new eyes is when we stop being old. How do we stop being old? We plug ourselves into truth. We plug ourselves in. God is a fountain of renewal. So in that sense, God is Hamachadish B'tuva B'chol Yom Tamid, Ma'asav Reishis. God is constantly renewing the world every moment. So when we, it's not just that we accept the yoke of heaven. When we do that, we tap in to an energy source where everything is renewable. It's not just like going green. It is green. It's exciting and it's new. So that's the first teaching of the teachings, top 10 teachings of the daf. The second one is when to make a bracha when washing your hands in the morning, the debate between the Rosh and the Rashba, and the practice of Rabbi Moshe Feinsteins. So let's take a look at the Gemara on this. The Gemara says, we just read it, but I'll repeat the part of it that's relevant for here. Yifna v'yitol yadav. Person should go to the restroom and then they should wash their hands. So on this, the question is, when is this washing of when is the best time to wash your hands? In the morning and make a bracha of al natilas yadayim. So there's a debate. The Rosh, mostly based on this Gemara and possibly other places as well, says that it's clear that the main washing is before we daven. So it's like you wake up, you don't run to wash your hands. After you go to the bathroom and you know that the next thing you're going to do is you're going to daven, then you wash your hands. Then it would be appropriate to make the bracha al natilas yadayim. And then you go and you put on your teffilen and you daven. The Rashba, because why are you, what is the main reason why you're washing your hands? The main reason is to prepare yourself to be able to daven. So it's not per se, you're not required, we don't find clearly in the Talmud that you have to wash your hands in the morning when you get up. It's when you're going to daven that you have to wash your hands. Therefore, you'd make the bracha. If you let's say had to wake up at 6 and the minyan you're going to go to is at 7, so you'd wake up according to the Rosh, you'd wash natilas yadayim because that's our custom today. But that's not the main. That's not natilas yadayim. You're just washing your hands. That's a custom. You don't make a bracha on that. Especially since the requirement, according to the Talmud, is to wash your hands before davening. You go to Shul an hour after you've already been up and about the house. You've already had your coffee. You've already made Birchas HaTorah. You probably learned a little bit of Chumash or something and a few other things. And now you're finally in Shul. It's an hour, maybe 2 hours after you've already been up. Now you wash your hands. Now you make al natilas yadayim, the Rosh would say. Put on your talis and tefillin and daven. Comes along the Rashba, and the Rashba is the star student of the Ramban, Nachmanides, and the Rashba says, no. Rashba says the reason why we wash our hands in the morning is because when we were asleep, something was missing, and now that we got up again, we want to sanctify our full day to be able to begin our day again. So to do that, like a Kohen, we're a little bit like a priest, even though we're not priests. So we wash our hands to purify ourselves after the impurity that happens at night. It's not just because we went to the bathroom, it's because we went to sleep at night and something happens. It's perhaps we call it a ruach hatum hashar al yadav, some type of ritual impurity that's because we slept the night through, and our souls were not fully in our bodies when we sleep, and other reasons we have to wash our hands. The Ramban was a great Kabbalist, so the Rashba was also presumably a Kabbalist, except he also argued a lot. He put a cherem on Abulafia, another great Kabbalist who the Rashba really did not like. So the Rashba says you got to wash. What I do, I follow the Rashba. I wash my hands and make al netilas yadayim close to the time that I get up from bed. Sometimes I'll wash, and then I won't make the al netilas yadayim until after I go to the bathroom. But then after I go to the bath, as if I wash before I'm like fully up and I'm kind of getting up, I won't make al netilas yadayim yet. But once I'm fully up and I've gone to the bathroom, I'll wash, make al netilas yadayim, and then I'll do many things before davening. And then when I get to davening, I may wash my hands a second time if I wasn't careful to note where my hands are, so to speak. And then I'll wash again before davening, but I will not make a bracha the second time, or sometimes it's often the third time that I'm washing before davening, because I'm following the shita of the Rashba. Comes along Rabbi Moshe Feinsteins and says a very interesting custom, a very interesting approach. I'm going to quote from the Sefer Mesoras Moshe, Rabbi Mordechai Tendler, Reb Moshe's grandson and his gabbai for many years, noted in many notebooks the practices of Reb Moshe, and as well as asked him and had noted other answers to questions that people asked that were not always written down in the Igros Moshe. And this is one of those examples where I'm not going to read it to you inside, but I will just say it outside. What he basically says in Mesoras Moshe Volume 3, it's page Daled and page Hey, is the following. And this is how Rabbi Tendler explained to me what Reb Moshe would actually do, and then I'll refer to the written words here. So Reb Moshe would do the following. He'd wake up, he'd wash his hands. He wouldn't make the bracha al netilas yadayim the first time he'd wash his hands. And then he would do a number of things before he would go to daven. And then he would try to make sure that he would go to the restroom right before he'd wash his hands for davening, and then he'd make the al netilas yadayim that time that he would come out of the bathroom and be on his way or already in Shul or about to daven. And that was his way of needing to make al netilas yadayim a second time. And if he didn't have to go to the bathroom, he would touch his shoe. Because the halacha is, if you touch your shoe, you also have to wash your hands before davening, because your shoe is a dirty thing, and if you touch your shoe, you have to wash your hands before davening. So if he wouldn't go to the bathroom, he'd touch his shoe, then he'd wash his hands, make al netilas yadayim, and go and daven. In theory, however, what Reb Moshe said is that you could wash your hands in the morning, close to the time of getting up, and go about your morning, you're learning, you're doing whatever it is you're doing in the morning, an hour, 2 hours. In theory, you could make al netilas yadayim. Reb Moshe didn't necessarily do this theory, but it was a theoretical construct. You could make the al netilas yadayim an hour after you had already washed, because that way you'd be making the bracha close to the time of davening, so you'd be fulfilling the teaching in a sense of the rush, which is to wash and make a bracha before davening, even though you washed well before davening. But since you know your hands were clean, you were aware of where your hands were, you're making it's clear that the al netilas yadayim, the bracha that you're making, is because you washed your hands for tefillah, for the davening, not just because you got up in the morning. Now here's what's interesting about that. The Chazon Ish had the opinion that one should, to fulfill both these obligations, one should wash early in the house and then wait and make Birchas HaShachar in Shul. So let's say the person's getting up at 6 and Birchas HaShachar in Shul is 7. So what the person would do is that for an hour, they know where their hands are, so they're not going to the bathroom again. They would wait till they'd go to Shul, and one of the brachos they would say in the time that the chazan is making Birchas HaShachar, the morning blessings, would be al netilas yadayim. Reb Moshe takes issue with that because Reb Moshe says that idea that we have Birchas HaShachar in the Shul is meant for amaratzim. It's meant for people who don't know the words. And so the chazan says it for them. One person who knows how to say the words, the chazan waits and says it for them so they can fulfill their obligation. But the majority of people who know how to daven and know how to read Hebrew, they really should be saying Birchas HaShachar closer to the time that they get up, because the actual brachas of Birchas HaShachar are all on things that we do when we get up and get dressed in the morning. And the only reason why we don't do them like they did in the time of the Gemara, while we're putting on our shoes and our socks and our clothing and our belt and our hat, is simply because a lot of us have not yet washed on the netilas yadayim, and in the time of the Gemara, it doesn't seem like they actually had to wash on the netilas yadayim before they got dressed, because they were aware where their hands were. And I guess the reasons of the Rashba and other Kabbalists were not yet widely acknowledged in the time of the Talmud. Question for another time, why not? Okay, that is number 2. Number 3 is 3 ways or multiple ways to read the Gemara about washing hands before davening. I'm not talking about this line of the Gemara. The Gemara continues and says something else. It's only related, but it's not the same really. And this is the Gemara says. Number 3. I found that little yad. Let's see. The Harabchista layet aman de mahader amaya beidin salosa. Reb Chista was unhappy with those who tried to look for water to wash their hands with, meaning they didn't have it readily available at a time. Sosa usually means davening, but here the Gemara explains when that is. V'hani mili, that when is this said? L'kriya shema, for reciting the shema. Ava l'tefila, but when it comes to davening, mahader, go ahead and look for water. The Gemara asks, v'ad kama, how far should we go? Ad parsa, up to a parsang. The Rambam and others bring down that it's 8,000 amos. An amma is about 1.5 feet, according to many opinions. So that would be 12,000 feet. Okay, approximately. V'hani milu l'kameh, but that's only if you're traveling and that's in the same direction that you're anyway going in. Aval achura, but if it's behind you, meaning it's not the way you're going, afilu mil enechozer. If it's a mil, you don't have to go back. Milhu de nechozer hapachas ben mil chozer, which is if it's a mil, you don't go back. If it's less than a mil, you would go back. Here's what we have to discuss, at least three opinions. Let's start with Rashi. Because the question is, when it comes time to reading the Shema, you have the first 3 hours of the day to read the Shema, and for davening, you're supposed to daven within the first 4 hours of the day. So the question is, we're in a rush to say the Shema. We're afraid that if you don't say it and you're going to wait to look for water, you'll be over the Zman Kriya Shema. You'll transgress the time frame of in which Shema should be stated. But we're not concerned, at least according to most of the Gemaras that we have, we're not concerned about the davening itself. What does that mean? Why not? Davening also has Zman Tefillah. You have an extra hour, but are we not concerned at all? Are we concerned about the time passing, but we have a little more leeway? Let's see what Rashi and Tosafos says. So Rashi says, Kriya Shema, the concern is for Kriya Shema, Be'idna de Kriya Shema, in the time of Kriya Shema. Why? Be'idna in this time. The Kriya Shema, Shizmana Kavua, it has a very set time. Pen Yavar Hazman, and perhaps the time will pass by. Aval Tefillah, the Chol Hayom Zmana. For Tefillah, on the other hand, all day is its time. So therefore, Hutzarech Mahader Amaya, a person would have to go out of their way to a certain extent, as the Gemara elucidates, to look for water to wash one's hands with. This is a very strange Rashi. Rashi seems like a lot of Chabad Hasidim. Tefillah, the Chol Hayom Zmanu, Tefillah, the whole day is Zman. Yeah, it's Zman Tefillah for Mincha in the afternoon, and actually between 4 hours of the day and Chatzos, it's not the ultimate time is Zman Tefillah. It's you still daven, you still get schar, but it's not Tefillah Bismana. So what exactly is Rashi talking about? You know, I had this very defense of Hasidim and coming on to weird things to defend certain Hasidic practices of missing Zman Tefillah. Well, look at this Rashi. It's more important to look for water. It doesn't matter. You'll daven whenever you daven, as long as it's during the day, to find some water. I mean, that's a pretty strong defense for Hasidim, who originally were saying they wanted to prepare themselves for tefillah. If washing your hands with water is preparing yourself, and mentally or emotionally learning some Hasidus or doing hisbonenus is preparing yourself. I don't know why the Mistagdim were so against the Hasidim. You've got Rashi as a strong defender. Okay, there's many people who explain what Rashi means, but it requires an explanation, meaning, in a certain sense, it's Zman Tefillah. It's even if it's not the best time for Tefillah, you still have a Zman Tefillah, and therefore Rashi is saying what Rashi says. Tosafos doesn't agree with Rashi. Tosafos says the following: the Logarsinale, he doesn't like this thing, this whole thing. The Gemara that we have, he doesn't have it in his edition. Why? The law about not spending time looking for water for Kriya Shema has the same applicability when it comes to davening. Why? Mitam shelo yaver zman tefillah. In order, he's, I guess, in this case, the Tosafos is with the Misnagdim. He's very nervous about Zman Tefillah. God forbid it should pass the Zman Tefillah. What's the difference? It's an hour difference, but it's only an hour. V'im yesh l'kaman perik mishamesu patlu l'nitulusa could have chista delight amanda mahader amaya b'idin slosa amidol hiskashem kriyishma mashma l'chol inyan muter. In fact, if you look in another Gemara on Chav Beis, it's in every edition, no mention. It just says davening. He wouldn't, it's not the way Rashi's Girsa was. It leaves out any distinction between Kriya Shema and davening. It's just, you don't look for water. You don't miss this man because of water. Okay, I guess the Misnagdim have Tosafos to rely on here. Okay. And there is some other Gemara that talks about Dalad Milin, and that's according to he says that's talking about not water, but it's talking about for a minyan. If you have to go out of your way for a minyan, you don't go that far out of your way if it's out of the way, but you go a little bit out of your way if it's on the way. Okay, so let's, and then there's a third opinion. Let's see, in the back of my I've cooked Gemara here. Let's see, there's always many opinions. Well, there's a lot of opinions here, but I'm only interested in one more. So that's more back to the Rashba that we did already in earlier with Reb Moshe and the Rosh. Here, okay, we've got Rashi, we've got Tosafos, and what was the third shita? Okay. So it could be the Rashba that says there could be there could be different differences. Perhaps Kriya Shema is Daraisa, so we're worried about the time. You don't have to go after the water, but when it comes to the tefillah, since it's only rabbinic, we're not so worried about the time. Okay, and Rabbi Yone brings that same reason. The Meiri, that's what I wanted to share with you. So, HaMeiri Kaisev Shalamaisa en Chilik ben Kriya Shema lebein tefillah. In actuality, there is no distinction when it comes to looking for water between Kriya Shema and davening. Shebishnehem ein tzarich lachsar kishiyar shiavra ezman. In either case of those two things, when the person is looking at his clock and nervous about it, about the Zman Kriya Shema or the Zman Tefillah, he does not have to look for water. It's just telling us a factual distinction. Since there is an hour difference between when the time of Shema is supposed to be finished or started according to some, and the Sof Zman Tefillah, when the time of Kriya Shema is coming, you got to hurry and not look for water. Better not to put off the acceptance of the yoke of heaven. You have another hour, so look for water. So in other words, sometimes we make too much of a big deal about a difference. The difference is not a difference; it's just a difference of an hour. There's no actual difference. So that's the third way, the Meiri. I wanted to share that with you. Very interesting sugya and halacha. Of course, there's a lot. There's more ways when it comes to netilas yadayim in the morning and for davening to be learned about. And other shitos as well, but this is a nice beginning for top 10 teachings of Daf Tes Vav. We continue with the top 10 teachings. We're now on number 4, which is the 3 opinions about whether or not you hear the Shema, the person saying the Shema, whether they have to hear themselves say the Shema. The first opinion is that of Rabbi Yose that says you do not fulfill your obligation of reciting the Shema if you didn't hear yourself saying the Shema. The second 2 opinions, which the Gemara spends a lot of time trying to figure out who's who in the second of the 2 opinions, and I am not going to walk you through every step of that process, because that's why you have your own art scroll or your own Davidson edition of the Talmud online with Sefaria, or even better, break your head on the Gemara, just old school. You'll do that on your own. I'll just give you some of the Rosh Prakim, some of the kind of the major key ideas here. So you've got one shita that says you should try to hear yourself say the Shema, but it's not b'di'evad required, meaning if ipso facto, if you didn't do it, that's good enough. The third opinion is Lechatchila, which means it's fine to go ahead and read the Shema, whisper it quietly in a way that it's inaudible. Your lips are moving, but no sound is coming out. Not even you can hear yourself, because it's not even a whisper. It's just quiet, but your lips are moving. That's the third opinion. See, if you look at the Mishnah says, I marked up this weekly edition here of the daf. Hakoras Shema v'lo hashmiya la'aznav. Somebody reads the Shema but didn't have his ears hear himself. Yatsa, the first opinion, I'm going to say that's Rabbi Yehuda, says you fulfill your obligation. Rabbi Yose Omer lo yatsa. Rabbi Yose says you do not fulfill your obligation. Okay, the Mishnah also happens to say Carlebach diktik b'yoseha. Here it's a change of opinions. If the person read it but was not careful to pronounce the words properly, there Rabbi Yose Omer yatsa. Rabbi Yose is more lenient in that case, says you do fulfill your obligation. Rabbi Yehuda Omer lo yatsa. Then Rabbi Yehuda, in a role reversal, says no, you don't fulfill your obligation. Carlebach lo yatsa. If you read it backwards, they explain what that means. One does not fulfill their obligation. If one made a mistake, they should go back to the place they made the mistake. The Gemara says, my time at Rabbi Yose, what's the reason that Rabbi Yose says you don't fulfill your obligation? And it says, Mishum dechsiv shema, because the verse says shema, right? We're going to assume it's the verse Shema Yisrael, hear, O Israel. Hashma la'aznecha ma she'ata motzei mipicha. Let it be heard by your ears what is coming out of your mouth. V'tanakama, the other Tana, the first opinion, Savar Shema b'chol lashon she'ata shomea. Shema just means whatever language you understand. It's not about listening, speaking, and listening to yourself. Rabbi Yose Tati Shema. Rabbi Yose says that's also true as well. In addition, you have to hear yourself, but it could be in another language. Earlier, there was the sages who actually did not. They learned. They didn't have those all reconciled, lined up like that. The Gemara is going to continue with the following case. It's not hasam acheresh. A type of person who can speak but can't hear. So they're deaf, but they can talk. They're not a deaf mute because they can talk. They can't bring truma because truma requires a bracha to be made. And so this guy can actually speak, so he can make a bracha. What's the problem? Well, there's a slight problem according to this opinion, because assuming we follow the opinion that says you have to hear the Shema, and maybe you want to extend that into you have to hear a bracha. So since he can't hear his own bracha, that perhaps might say there's a problem with his bracha. Therefore, it doesn't invalidate the truma. If he brought the truma, it is in fact truma. By the way, this is not the halacha, so it's an opinion. Who is the author of that opinion that says a cheresh, a deaf person who can talk but can't hear, that he can do that mitzvah b'di'evad, but lechatchila he shouldn't go ahead to do it to begin with because he can't make the bracha properly because he can't hear himself. Reb Yose here. Reb Chisa wants to say it's Reb Yose. It's non hakara es hakara shema v'lo shmi la'azno, like we said in the Mishnah. Yatsa devrei Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yose Omer lo yatsa. Rabbi Yose says if you didn't hear yourself say the Shema, you didn't fulfill your obligation. The Gemara says perhaps ad kan lo kamar Rabbi Yose lo yatsa elagabi kriya shema daraisa. Maybe you can make the distinction that he says you don't fulfill your obligation when you're reciting the Shema because it's biblically required. And in addition to that, Tosafos points out that Shema may be unique because it says Shema, listen. maybe other mitzvot, you don't have to listen. The Gemara will actually make that distinction later and say that this is, all of the stuff is not halacha l'maisa. The halacha l'maisa is we follow the opinion that says that in Kol Torah, in general in the Torah, you are not required to hear what you say. It's only Shema that there's a debate, and even Shema, the halacha is that you should say it loud enough for yourself to hear, but if you didn't, you're still Yotze. But I'm cheating for you because I know already the next page. Aval truma mishum bracha hu bracha sirabanan. The whole reason why we tell this fellow who's deaf but can speak not to do truma lechatchila, but he can do it b'diavad, is because the bracha. But the whole bracha is only derabanan. So even if you did extrapolate from one doraisa to another, what would make you think that you would then extrapolate it to arabanan? And v'lo b'bracha talim milsa, the act is not contingent on the bracha. The Gemara then turns away and just asks a question, Maybe Rabbi Yose he, Dilma Rabbi Yehuda he. Maybe it's not even Rabbi Yose, perhaps it's Rabbi Yehuda, and Rabbi Yehuda says that you are Yotze, reading Shema without hearing it, that's only b'diavad, but not Lechatchila. Okay, the Gemara will go on. But the bottom line is, it's a lengthy sugya that goes on here and here. There's certain elements that seem repetitive, and they are, but there are new elements that are added on the second half of Tes Vav Amud Beis. So it's not clear, it's not 100% repetitive, but there's a few points here I want to make. So the following. There is the opinion of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, that he has a very interesting concept that says that you should hear yourself say the Shema. Now, he quotes the same verse. Well, actually, it's interesting. He quotes the whole verse as opposed to Rabbi Yose, who only quoted Shema. But he quotes the whole verse. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Now, what's interesting about this opinion of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah that's quoted by Rabbi Yehuda is that it's not the same opinion as Rabbi Yose in our Mishnah. What he says is that there's a biblical Lechatchila. The Torah is preferring that one should recite the Shema while listening to, or being able to hear oneself speak. But it is not biblically required. Now, why is that like a problem? Can't the Torah advise you, about stuff without necessarily requiring it? It would be nice if you did it like this, but if you don't, it's okay. Well, it seems like a lot of rabbis think that that's their specialty. Rabbis like to make things hard. They like to say, well, we know that you can do this if you did it, but that's not what you should do. Meaning the rabbis are famous for making chumras, for making stringencies. The Torah is not famous for making stringencies. And there's a philosophical almost issue that a lot of rabbis have with the Bible making this type of chiluk, this type of distinction between lechatchila and b'diavad. One of the reasons is because it's almost like the rabbis are the ones who make an in-between stage where a safeguard means exactly that. It's a safeguard. You didn't actually violate the essence of the thing, but you are about to. So we make something usher lechatchila. We forbid something to begin with. But ipso facto, it would be okay. B'diavad. In fact, some of the commentaries say that if there is, or when we do find the concept of a lechatchila and b'diavad in a doraisa, it's only in the positive, meaning what's the better way of doing a thing positively. But we'll never find it in the negative, like don't do this, but if you do this, it's okay. You'll never find the Lechatchila and b'diavad of doraisa in a lo saseh, in a negative thing. That's an interesting distinction, and let's go on to that is number 6. Does the biblical law ever differentiate between Lechatchila and B'diavad? And certainly it seems that it does here in this case. But let's go back to number 5. And I'm going to be doing mostly Tosafos on number 5, which is about the concept of shomea ka'oneh, which means when you are listening to somebody, let's say you're listening to somebody blowing the shofar, it's as if you are doing the mitzvah of hearing the shofar. You are actually, it's not as if you're hearing it, but it's perhaps as if you're blowing the shofar. There's a question when it comes to shofar, what's the main mitzvah? Is the mitzvah to blow the shofar, and those who hear the shofar are considered like they're blowing it by dint of them listening? Or is the mitzvah to hear the shofar? And obviously somebody needs to blow the shofar to hear it. It sounds like an inane distinction, because what difference does it make? And of course there are differences, but I'm not going to talk about that now, because we are not, we're not going to. We're going to go further. In fact, I'm going to take you into a Tosafos here. But first I want to point out a Gemara before I read the Tosafos. Tanan Hasam. We learned in probably, it sounds like it's going to be a Megillah. Let's see. When you're not sure where the thing is, a Gemara, a good Gemara, has on what's called Mesoras Hashas. I'll bring it into the light. Mesoras Hashas are just cross-referencing from other when the Gemara is quoting other Masechtas or other parts of this Masechta. So the Mesoras Hashas here says Megillah Daf Yud Tes Amud Beis. Okay, Kol Inyan. Look, you want to see where the actual text that we're quoting. It's in the 19th Daf, 19b of Megillah. But what does it say there? I believe it's a Mishnah there. Hakol kisherim likros es a Megillah chutz micher shoyte v'katan. Everybody is kosher to read the Megillah except for a cheresh. Now, a cheresh could either mean a deaf mute, or it could mean somebody who's deaf but not mute. We'll get to that. Let's assume right now it's talking about somebody who obviously can speak. Otherwise, if he can't read it, there's no havamina that you would be yotze from him. So in this cheresh would be a cheresh who's deaf but is not mute. He can speak. Shota is somebody who has the halachic status similar to that of a child. They're not required to do mitzvos because they're mentally unfit, because they're very immature. They never reached a hischayvus, an obligatory state of their mind, never developed enough for them to be required to do mitzvahs. There's a general principle that only somebody who's required to do a mitzvah can fulfill others in their obligation. There are some exceptions, meaning if you are be'etzem required, meaning you are a bar chiyuv, you are obligated, except that you already fulfilled your obligation, you might still be able to allow other people to fulfill their obligation mitzad arvus, because kol yisrael arevim zelazeh, because we're all responsible for one another. But there's a little more complex than just that, but that's all you need to know for now. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yehuda Masher B'Katan. Rabbi Yehuda does permit a youngster, somebody under the age of bar mitzvah. By the way, it doesn't say, if you notice, it doesn't say that a woman is not able to read the Megillah for you. So most authorities hold, at least they did hold originally, that a woman is obligated in hearing the Megillah, and therefore, because she's obligated in hearing the Megillah, a man can also fulfill his obligation to hear the Megillah through a woman reading it. The most notable exception to that was the Baal Halachas Gedolos. He must have had another girsa in his Gemara, and it made a distinction that all people are obligated in hearing the Megillah, including women, but that somehow women were not, even though they were obligated in hearing it, they're not obligated so much in reading it, and therefore can't fulfill a man's obligation. That's how many people understand the Bahag. Many poskim today say that really women can read the Megillah, except we don't want to disrespect the Bahag, even though they understood that the Bahag had a girsa in the Gemara that almost no one else had. So really they should be able, from a textual basis, women really should be able to read the Megillah. For men, it's now more a question of custom, of what a community did over many years, and therefore it depends on what your custom is to understand what the law is. I didn't prepare this, so I don't want to get into trouble for something that I don't have any fresh recollection about, but it's just from my memory. It's just because it doesn't say a woman, right? A woman doesn't fulfill your obligation to hear the Megillah from. But a cotton, there's a debate. Tanakama says you can't fulfill your obligation. Rabbi Yose says a cotton can fulfill your obligation. Mashab cotton. The Gemara says Montana Charish Diavad Nami Lo. The opinion that says that in this mission that a charish cannot fulfill our obligation to hear the Megillah, it would indicate that even Lechatchila, it's not just Lechatchila, it's even B'di Eved, meaning it's not just that we should prefer not to have a charish, it's even if all you have is a charish, you still do not fulfill your obligation. Or you happen to have heard it from a charish, you'd have to go and rehear it from somebody else who's not a charish. Amar Amasna, who is the author of that? In other words, there's a statement, we were trying to find which Tana we can attribute it to. So he says, Reb Yose he. That must be Reb Yose. Titnan, getting back to our Mishnah, quoting our Mishnah, Hakor Eshma v'lo Shmila Ozno Yatsa, Divrei Yehuda, Reb Yose Omer lo Yatsa. You don't fulfill your obligation if you didn't hear it. And since a cherish cannot hear, we'd apply that principle to Megillah. The Gemara starts questioning that, but let's go to Tosafos now. So I was going to point out some issues. Rabbi Yehuda Mashir Bekatan. So the Tosafos says, "V'im tomer be'ezeh katan ma'iri." What katan are we talking about? I bekatan shelo higia lechinuch. If we're talking about a katan that did not reach the age of chinuch, Rashi earlier had stated that the age of chinuch is 9 or 10. The truth is, chinuch, it depends on which mitzvah. Certain mitzvahs chinuch is 5 or 6. Other mitzvahs is 7 or 8. Other mitzvahs are 9 and 10. So we'd have to look up what's the approximate age of chinuch for something like Mikra Megillah. I'm going to venture to say it's probably 9, 10, not 7, 6 or 7. Based in we already have this concept, this established concept that somebody who's not obligated in something doesn't fulfill the community's need to hear that something. And if it's a child that's a little kid, let's say a 5-year-old genius, managed to read the Megillah, since he has no chiyuv of chinuch yet, he didn't reach the age where he's obligated or his parents are obligated. There's a lot of brisker Torahs about a chiluk, a distinction between whether he has his own mitzvah or it's just a mitzvah of his parents. But be that as it may, he's reached neither of those stages, so he definitely cannot fulfill the community's need to hear the Megillah. So the question would be, my time at Rabbi Yehuda Demasher, how could Rabbi Yehuda possibly allow that to say it's permitted? And if he did in fact reach the age of chinuch, let's just say it's 9 or 10 again, my tamad rabbanan daminin the asri. Why would the rabbis forbid it? Hare kriyas Megillah rabbanan. Why should they allow it? Because reading the Megillah is not a biblical mitzvah; it's a rabbinic mitzvah. In certain respects, a child who reaches the age of chinuch it has halachic requirements, at least rabbinically, to do mitzvos, and therefore should be able to, because of his obligation, that he personally has, he would also then be, and I could even theoretically say she, depending on whether you don't have the Bahag's gears of the Gemara, should be able to be yotz to the congregation, kigadol. Now, Opota Dirabanan, and can fulfill the rabbinic obligations. The case that's brought down in further later in chapter Mishamesu in our tractate, right? That's we have Mishamesu is coming up very soon, and look at that, we're moving right along. There it says, there's an obligation to v'achalta v'savata uverachta. You shall eat and be satisfied, and do birchas hamazon. We're going to be talking about that soon. I don't want to give away all the details, but there's this amazing thing that the Jews were machmer. We took on a stringency that even though you have to eat kedei svia, but even if you eat a lesser amount, we obligated ourselves to bench, even though the Torah didn't. So if the father has this rabbinic obligation to make brachas hamazon, not a biblical one, and the son did eat a full meal, and the son is satisfied, the son could then lead the zimun. And in the olden days, leading the zimun wasn't just that they would say Rabosai Nevarech, they would actually do all of the benching, and the other participants wouldn't bench along with them. They would just listen. Maybe they would say Amen, but they wouldn't. But they would just really be listening, as not speaking. Okay, they didn't have benchers. They didn't have. Not everyone could read. Not everyone knew it by heart. So one person would do it for those gathered. So in this case, an amazing idea. Since the son is almost like equal in obligation, because even though his mitzvah is only for chinuch, it's the training wheel mitzvah of chinuch, of being trained to do a mitzvah, but he satisfied himself, so he's required in a certain sense more, in a certain sense less. So more and less makes what? The same. The father is required more because he's an adult, but less because he didn't eat the biblically required amount to be fulfilled, to be satisfied, and eat the bench. He only ate the rabbinic, so therefore, the son fulfills his father's obligation. The father did not the shloacha ela kazayis. The father did not eat the full amount; he only ate the kazayis. The Tosafos gives two answers. I'm going to go to the second answer. You know what? I'm really thirsty. I wonder if I could pause this thing. Let's see. I want to